Hey, everybody, it's Chris Aiken from the Classic Metal Show and the Aftershocks podcast. And I know you want to see this next episode, but right before we do it, just want to remind you that if you have an Amazon device, whether it's a TV or a Fire Stick or Fire Cube or whatever it would be, a Firebox if you're old school, make sure you add the CMSPN to it. Just look up CMS Podcast Network on your Amazon device. Add the channel, and you will get every episode of all 4 shows for free right there on your TV. Make us part of your TV viewing every single day and night, all right? It's the CMS Podcast Network, cmspn.com, and it is now on Amazon. So get it, all right? All right, here's the episode you came to see.
You are about to enter the Shockwave Skull Sessions podcast on shockwaveskullsessions.com. And now your host, Bob Nalbandian.
Cool. All right, Shockwave Skull Sessions podcast. We got my partner here, of course, Matt Hartnett. What's going on, Matt?
What's going on, Bob?
And we got some fellow podcasters on this episode here. We got Mark Strigl, of course, from Talking Metal and Talking Rock and Talking Anything. I guess you got a lot of stuff going on.
A lot of
What's
talking.
Going on there,
yeah.
Mark?
Hey, Bob, how are you? Thanks for having me. Hey, Matt, how are you? Honored to be here.
All right, and we got his partner with the Talking Rock podcast, Mr. Victor Ruiz. How you doing there, Victor?
I'm doing well. I do have to correct you. Joey Haney is the guy that does Talking Rock with him. I actually do a 2 Patreon podcasts with Mark.
Oh, okay. I was confused about that because I heard Talking Rock. I didn't hear you on that, but I hear you promoting it, so I wasn't quite sure what. But you have done some episodes though together, right? Or is that just through Patreon?
Well, the Talking Rock podcast is still in existence. However, we used to have a site that Victor worked on with me called Talking Rock, which we're not really updating anymore. I'm kind of just that was a site that had blog posts and news and all sorts of stuff, and we're kind of just focusing on the podcasting element and video element now. So there's no actual website where you can go for news and updates from myself and Victor. It's just all about the podcast and video now.
All right. And speaking of podcasts, man, you were one of the pioneers. In fact, the first podcast I was turned on to was Talking Metal and the Rock and Roll Geek Show. And back then, we're talking, I guess it must have been, 2005 or something? Does that sound about right?
Yeah, we started, our first episode went up in, I believe, late August 2005. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. So it was, right around then. And there were very few, especially on rock and metal at that time, podcasts going on. So you've been doing it pretty much between you and Michael Butler. I think you were the most consistent podcast. I mean, going on now, well over 15 years straight through. You never took a break. You've been doing it. I mean, of course, you did the show on Fuse for a while, but you kept the Talking Metal going throughout.
Yeah, it's been fairly consistent. I believe in 2011, we went down to like an episode every 2 or 3 weeks. And so that was kind of a weak year. We didn't do any guests that entire year. It was just a kind of a crazy year for me personally with kids being born and all sorts of stuff. But besides that, and we never stopped, but there was definitely kind of a lull at that time. And believe it or not, I feel like we lost in that lull. We lost a lot of listeners because, as you guys know, I mean, consistency is such an important part of this. And, if you're not hitting the people with the episode when they expect it to drop, they disappear pretty quickly, and unsubscribe. And but yeah, man, so it's been a long journey. It's definitely evolved the show. I mean, my partner who I started the show with, John, he's still involved, but not quite on the level that he used to be. But he does join me for our live video streams and makes appearances on the podcast here and there. But it's kind of more rolled over to just kind of become my thing, which I'm loving and digging and, experiencing different guests and talking with new people and just continuing to learn about the music we love is why I continue to do it. It's as you know, it's just a passion. I've tried to stop. I can't.
Yeah, Mark, you I was listening to your last podcast you did, and you were saying that what got you really started into the whole podcast world was when you made your appearance on VH1. And that really kind of kicked off, I guess the interest for you to do this. And you say, well, you, Victor, I mean, you guys, I'm pretty much I'm a podcast royalty right here. You guys have been doing, this for years, all three of you guys. What the thing that's interesting to me is, obviously the podcast now, it's like, it's got a different, I guess, stigma to it now. I mean, obviously when there was only just a few of you, when it was Bob had his and Mark, you had yours back in the mid 2000s there. Now it's like everybody's got podcasts, everybody and their mother. And we talked a little bit about this last night with Victor. I mean, and you guys could all answer this, I guess. I mean, what is really, other than the fact that everybody's doing it now, what is really the big difference that you've seen in terms of either listenership or just, compared to when you first started? I mean, obviously it was pretty much, so new when you guys were starting out. I mean, what's the difference now in terms of what you're seeing and both, I guess, pros and cons of what's going on?
Go ahead, Victor.
Well, we touched upon it last night. Now, like you said, everyone has a show. You have labels forcing bands to do podcasts. You have, some comedians that have jumped on board that haven't been doing it for years. Celebrities, because they're looking for other forms of revenue, and much to the point that I made last night, once all this clears up, there's going to be a lot of people jumping ship from the clubhouses, from the firesides, and all the other apps that have come along that have that are trying to supplement from podcasting. Positives, I think that there are people that are more in the know of what it is and isn't like initially trying to tell someone, well, I do a podcast. Well, what's that? And at the end of the day, you're like, well, it's like listening to the radio on the internet. It's a show on the internet that you can listen to whenever you want, where, now most people know who it is. I have relatives that are in their 70s that now listen to podcasts that, 2 years ago, you'd explain it any way possible and they didn't understand what it was. The other thing that's happened, I mean, for me personally, back then I started in 2009. I was getting 20,000, 30,000 downloads per episode. And, with the advent of the Eddie Trunks and the Chris Jerichos and, all the bigger name people coming on board, obviously that dilutes how many people are listening to what you're doing. And also what Mark said, due to health issues and whatnot, I didn't put out as much content as I should have probably, but it is what it is. All these years later, I'm happy still doing it. So,
well, I guess we should plug your podcast, The Mars Attacks. And as I say, that's been going on for almost as long, correct? As far as I remember. 2009.
I'm a few years less than Mark and a whole hell of a lot of episodes less. I just released episode 213 and 214 yesterday. Mark is 900 and what?
I think 922.
Yeah. So he's been doing it for a much more consistent basis and for much longer. But if you want to blame anyone for hearing me podcasting, it's him. He's the one that that got me started. I'm a music geek like everyone else, and I still remember they had the Talking Metal forums, and there was something where they mentioned the Red Hot Chili Pepper guitarists, and they mentioned them out of order when they were in the band. And me being Larry David anal, I had to go into the forum and say, no, actually, this is the correct order of who was in the band. And Mark responded with, wow, you know a lot, why don't you start your own podcast? And I didn't know if he meant, beat it, kid, leave me alone. Or if it was, hey, you should actually do your own podcast. And he responded, he's like, no, I think people would like to listen to you or whatnot. So he's to blame for giving me the kick in the ass to get into the podcasting field. So I will always be grateful to him for that.
And Mark, Matt had said about VH1, both you and John Astronomy have had a previous career in, I guess, music video. You were working with VH1, and didn't you do work for the Sci-Fi Channel, the two of you together? And
yeah, I've been in the TV business since, for like 30 years now. So I started at MTV, and I was in the, videotape library, an entry-level position there. And I got to be a producer. And for people who don't know, MTV and VH1 were kind of like sister stations at the time. Both VH1 was technically MTV Networks. So MTV kind of ran VH1 along with Nickelodeon. So, yeah, and I produced shows for them, wrote shows for them, got to meet and hang out and interview cool people, from Sean Penn to David Bowie, even non-metal people like Mariah Carey and stuff like that. And then at some point, we were working on a show which I was writing and consulting on and co-producing, called the 100 Most Metal Moments of that was what it was called, 100 Most Metal Moments. And I
remember that. Mm-hmm.
We had a lot of holes in the script, and my boss said to me, "We're going to need you to jump in front of the camera because we need somebody to say this, and we need to tie this story together with this." So they said, "Do you know anybody else?" I said, "Well, my friend Eric and my friend John. Why don't the three of us jump in front of the camera and we will help complete the show?" And that's what we did. The show blew up. It got amazing ratings. And even at that time, 2004, the internet was already kind of happening with MySpace and all this other stuff. And people were just like, who the hell is this guy on VH1 talking like he knows everything about hard rock and heavy metal? And a guy who I'm now friends with, Stevie Rochelle over at Metal Sludge, wrote just a blistering attack on me and just tore me apart. And I remember thinking, wow, well, this guy's right. I really don't have any public street cred to prove that I'm the metal guy. And the only reason I got in front of the camera was because I had connections at VH1 and was working there. So I felt like, listen, I approached Sirius XM. I said, "Hey, I'm the guy on VH1. Can you give me a radio show?" And they said, "No." I said, "I'll do it for free." They said, "No." And I eventually heard Steve Jobs' keynote speech, and he was talking about this audio show that he was deeming it was going to be called podcasts, and anyone could make a podcast, and it would download when you hooked your iPod up to your computer. It would transfer from the computer over to your iPod, and then you could listen to it. And it was like a radio show, but even better because anyone could do it. And I said to my friend, John, I said, "I want to do a podcast." And he said, "Well, let's look at it." And we learned how to write the code for it. You couldn't go to a company and say, pay them, $40 a month to give you a podcast stream. So we wrote the code, and next thing we knew, we were one of the first 200 podcasts on iTunes, which is how you got your podcast back in those days. And that helped us. We were one of the first there, along with Michael Butler. And Michael Butler was a big influence because I was definitely listening to him before I started Talking Metal for a few months before. I think he started, less than a year before I did. But he was definitely an influence. And being a New York guy, I was also heavily influenced by Eddie Trunk, because what Eddie Trunk would do on his FM radio show in those days is he'd play a song here and there, but he'd also just get on and talk about the music with a passion and share opinions. And I thought, wow, this is great. And so that's kind of how we got into it. And for sure, Michael Butler was in my opinion, the absolute first guy to do this, and should always be given credit for that, which I'm not sure he gets the credit he deserves sometimes.
And he's still going strong. He's still
absolutely
been putting out episodes. He's probably up to well over 1,000 episodes.
I would guess. Yeah.
But cool. So it was Apple that pretty much invented the podcast, huh? Because it just started. Yes. Originally, it was only on iTunes, right? That was the only way you could get podcasts when it first started. Is that correct?
It's a good question, Bob. I think it was the easiest way to get it, although it was an RSS feed. So technically there would have been other ways to get it back in the days. But by subscribing to the feed, but iTunes was the platform that made it easy. Yeah.
Sure. Right on.
Yeah.
Very cool. And then
Yeah, I
Victor,
think
sorry, go ahead.
sorry, I was just going to say, I read an article actually earlier this week that said that the name actually comes from the fact that Mark brought it up, that you could just hook up your iPod and download it. So that's where they got the name podcast from, because it was directly related to the iPod.
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry, Matt.
I was gonna say, Victor, with yours, with Mars Attacks, so interesting thing about your podcast and just your site is you're one of the few that actually still do the old fashioned journalism, meaning you do album reviews and you actually have text, which is something we don't see anymore. I think most people now don't want to read anymore. Everybody really wants to, podcasts are great too, because people can get all their information by just listening, it's in their cars. I mean, even with books, right? Everybody loves those auditory books, people, it's easier, I guess, and they can listen to their car. So, in terms of that, I mean, is that something you're just still doing just because, you love to write? And that's something obviously you grew up on. We all grew up on reading magazines and fanzines and everything. Cause that's, like I said, that's something that's completely, I mean, you talk to people now, no one, I would say nobody, but unless people it's our age, maybe a little bit older than us. I mean, we still like to read, but a lot of the younger generations are just kind of tuning out to that. They really just want to tune in on podcasts instead of read.
Right. Yeah. I mostly focus on, if I do any sort of review now, it's part of the new releases post that I do on Fridays, which was a carryover from Talking Rock, actually. So it was something that Mark suggested. And my main reason for doing that, honestly, is search engine optimization, just to get more eyes on the site and to try to stick out from other sites that are carrying the same content. I mean, that's my biggest thing. I don't cover absolutely everything that comes out. I mean, I try to gear it more towards what music you would hear on the podcast or the people that I would interview. And I also kind of tie that in with, who's sending me promos. If I'm not getting promos from a specific label, if I don't know an artist, sometimes I won't post about it. And it's not that, anything against them, but I'm not, unfortunately, posting about an obscure death metal or black metal band on Nuclear Blast because maybe I just don't have any knowledge about them. I just try to focus on what I do know about. So.
Yeah.
Where do you guys see the future of podcasts? I mean, you talk about now with, especially with the COVID, that so many people have started up podcasts, and they'll probably, once things end and they start, so many musicians in particular, once they start going on tour, it'll probably fall by the wayside. Just as Mark said, which is so true. Once you start lacking on the episodes, it loses interest real quick, because there's a lot of great podcasts, but there's a lot of crap out there too, where, like I said, anyone now could do a podcast. And, of course, we've moved into, and I know, Mark, you've done the video podcast as well. You've done some great, we talked earlier about the interviews you did with like Carmine Appice and so forth, or Carmine Appice, I should say. And, we've started that, of course, with the Skull Sessions on the CMSPN. So, I mean, do you see it kind of falling by the, what's interesting is only very few, the Joe Rogans and the Adam Carollas that have been able to make a huge amount of money on podcasts, and other people, like yourself and others could make, do it on yourselves through Patreon and through just direct fan donations kind of thing. But there's always that wide gap of, there's little money to be made, and then there's that kind of huge money to be made for the ones that get, super popular. But what do you see in the future of the podcast or the video podcast? We'll start with you, Mark.
I think, you hit upon something there with the whole COVID thing and, where we've been the last year. I think that people are going to they're like basically now used to seeing things in this format. So I do think that this will continue post COVID. I think we've seen how easy it is for the four of us to get together in different parts of the world. And I do think that it will continue. However, I do also think there is going to be a big want to get back to doing in-person things. And I think there's to me, there's nothing like sitting down and looking somebody in the eye with nothing between you but a microphone. I think we will see more of that. I cannot wait to do that. I don't want to do Zoom interviews anymore. Honestly, I just want to do all in person, and that'll probably not be the case, because obviously if I get offered somebody who's a big name and it's on Zoom or Skype, of course I'll do it. But I'm looking to do as many in-person interviews as possible. But as far as the future of podcasting goes, I think there are two things to look at. As Victor kind of hinted upon, the corporate America and the corporations throughout the world have discovered that they can make money off of this. So what we're seeing is a lot of money being pushed into it by different corporations, and I think it makes it harder for people who are looking to start a podcast independently. I think it's much harder to start it nowadays than it was when I started. My only competition was, the Rock and Roll Geek Show. There was nothing else to listen to. People, it was like, oh, I can listen to talking metal or nothing else. There was another show called Entropy League. It was a metal show that was on back then that long since disappeared, but there was no competition. I have no idea how you could cut through the noise and the money that corporate America is pumping into podcasting right now. But things will evolve and things will change, and we'll see where we end up. But I think it's tough to start a podcast nowadays.
What about you, Victor? Coming from Europe, being in Spain, did you see it as a different perspective, or?
Yeah, well, I mean, everything is so far behind the States here when it comes technology wise. Podcasting is, again, now starting to be a big thing here. When I started podcasting in 2009, if I'd even approach promoters to say, hey, I want to interview so-and-so, they're like, what's that? Who are you? If you're not with a national medium, you can't interview anybody. And it was a continuous uphill battle. So I decided that what I was going to do was forget about focusing on what was going on here and just focus on, PR people and labels in the States. The person that made me decide that was I sent an interview to Metal Blade asking to interview John Bush, and I got the interview through an email, whereas I was fighting with a local band to interview a member, and he was asking me $9 for his CD plus, to take him out and buy him some drinks to do an interview. I'm like, fuck you, dude. Your family doesn't even know who you are. And I can get John Bush to an interview. So why am I wasting my time here? So I stopped interviewing, bands that were from here. To Mark's point, a lot of what's going on here is similar to, the Adam Carollas and the, people like that, or the Joe Rogans that have the podcast here as well. So they're celebrities. They're people that are on TV. They're people that are already bringing in an established fan base to what's popular here. So, I mean, it's more or less, it's the same game per se, but it's just tailored more towards the audience here as opposed to what's done there. And I mean, if we look at all the mega bucks that have been thrown around by Spotify, and now that Apple's going to start to do it as well, you look at someone like Joe Rogan, who's a stand-up comedian. He was on Fear Factor. He was the voice of UFC. He was in so many different things. So he already had, an audience that he brought with him. So, I always like to talk about the 1%. If you have 1,000 followers or 1,000 people that supposedly follow or listen to you, 1% is going to be a diehard that's going to listen to everything. And 1% of that 1% is actually going to spend money on whatever it is that you're hawking. It's a similar deal with Rogan. If millions of people know who he is, if a few 100,000 listen to his show every day, or even in the low, 1 million or 2 million, as opposed to what he was getting on TV years ago, it all kind of trickles down, but it's enough that a Spotify or an Apple Music is going to make money. So, that's why they're throwing all this money around. Like Mark said, being an independent podcaster, it's impossible. I have musicians that still come up to me and say, hey, I'm going to make a killing off of this because my album sold millions in the 80s. It's like, right, but what have you done since to connect with your audience? If you've been, for the most part, gone for 40 years, and not connected with anyone, you're going to be starting out. Sure, you're going to be ahead of me because more people are going to know who you are. But at the same time, it's still an uphill battle. You unfortunately don't have, the recognition of a Josta or an Eddie Trunk or someone like that who has been, doing all the legwork and doing shows for the last 10, 15, 20 years. So,
well, it is a timing thing too. Like you said, like I'm sure if today, if Joe Rogan was to do a podcast today, it wouldn't be near as popular. Or if Adam Carolla, they started early on, and same with like a Jamie Jost and stuff. He's been doing it for a while because you see a lot of these celebrities now starting podcasts, and it's like it's already too saturated. It's not going to have the impact. No matter how big you are, even if you're a bigger celebrity than Joe Rogan, you're not going to compete with that because he's got that big audience and that base. And for somebody and there's only so many podcasts you can listen to. I mean, I'm always discovering new stuff every day. And, some of these are hour or 2 hour shows. So you can only, allow for so many. And so I'm sure there's a ton of podcasts out there that I probably love that I probably haven't even discovered yet or just haven't got to. But absolutely. It is becoming very saturated.
Yeah, and like you're saying, the big names that are jumping in now, the only ones that are making a dent is because a company like Disney or Universal is behind them, and they're pumping a shitload of money into ads and different things so that they're cutting through. Just some, former member of a boy band that's just deciding to do a podcast now all of a sudden on their own. It's exactly what you're saying. He's just another one of the bunch. Maybe in his hometown he's got the number one podcast, but in the grand scheme of things, no one knows who he is or that he has a show.
Sure.
Yeah. And I think too, what's important is, for obviously podcasts like all of ours, since we're not big name musicians or celebrities, you have to figure out, you have to get creative and how are you going to really, and I think, one thing Mark does really good. I mean, on your Patreon, Mark, like you're doing, I think today with the Holy Diver discussion, you're involving your fans in the podcast itself, and like you said, I think, doing the Patreons and doing the subscribe stars and really, allowing your fans to be more involved instead of just listening, where they can actually submit questions or and do something like Mark's doing today, I think is really what's going to really separate one's podcast from a lot of the rest of the ones that, aren't as consistent or even for some of the bigger, musicians who, like a Rob Flynn or whoever. I mean, once they go back out on the road, like we were talking about last night, Victor, I mean, that's going to, a lot of these, once live music comes back, I mean, a lot of these things are going to die out. And it's really, like, as you guys have been talking about, the consistency. But I really think doing the Patreon subscribe stars and getting your listeners more involved in the actual show itself is really important.
Absolutely. Yep, definitely. And just making them feel like they're a part of something, I think is so important. And I mean, even a guy like Joe Rogan, it's like his listeners all feel like they're a part of something. It's like being a fan of a certain band. Like if you tell me, oh yeah, I like that band too, suddenly like I have a more favorable opinion of you because we're relating on that issue. So yeah, I think being relatable and just the consistency that all plays into it. Yeah, but it's tough to compete with corporate money. It doesn't mean that you can't, but it is definitely a challenge.
And I think it's cool that like you on your podcast, Mark, and Michael Butler, you thank everyone personally for the donations or for the Patreon. And for the listeners, for me, it's just like, you have to wait through 10 minutes of you're listing all these names. It's like, for this, but for the listener or for the people being thanked, it means a lot, to hear their name, on a podcast for, donating, $20 a month or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, some of those people are $2 a month, and there's one guy who's $50 a month. So it's like I feel like those are the people who I really have to thank. And there's always that little fast forward button, so you can jump right over there if you want. But, yeah,
it's cool that you do that.
But I hear
the listeners kind of like,
yeah,
I did the interview already.
Yep, I hear you.
But no, that's cool. Well, right on. Matt,
Yeah, I actually had somebody tell me that this week. Why don't you read off all our names like Mark does at the beginning of the show? And I'm like, oh, I guess that never like dawned on me, and I started actually doing that with yesterday's episode. So again, learning something all the time.
right on.
Yeah,
Very cool.
Yeah. Well, just turning to something different. Obviously, something just happened last week in New York. Mark, you did a podcast about it with the Hardcore Show with Madball.
Yeah.
That thing took off. I mean, it was thousands of people. I mean, obviously, it's funny because it's causing this big ripple. I mean, a lot of people love it. Some people are pissed off because people weren't social distancing and wearing their masks and all that. But the thing that's interesting to me, it's like I think it's something we've been waiting for because, I mean, it's bringing back. It's sort of like that rebellious, attitude again of what rock and metal really was. Of being like, fuck you, we're gonna play a show, and fans are gonna come out and they're gonna go crazy. And it's just interesting though. It's causing a lot of ripples in the obviously on all the in the media and the press and everything. But talk about, I mean, Mark, obviously, like I said, you're closer there than any of us. I mean, what's been the buzz around the New York, New Jersey area with that show? It seems like that really was a big hit.
Yeah, I think it was. I mean, I think the buzz is that no matter where you are on things like the vaccine or COVID or social distancing or any of this, I think the reality of it is we're all ready to rock again, and it's freaking time. It's time.
Mm-hmm.
I wore my mask every day, from March 2020, like a good boy, all the way to, to last month. I like a good boy got vaccinated as soon as I could. I'm waiting for everyone else to catch up with me. That's a whole nother topic, but all that stuff aside, we're ready for live music. Yeah. Every single rock fan wants to rock. And, I heard people who were at the Madball show and they were like, I'm not vaccinated. I don't give a shit. Other people told me, yeah, I was there and I'm vaccinated. I felt safe. I was there. Everyone who was there freaking loved it. And was it a responsible thing to do? I don't know. That's a whole nother issue. But it's time that we realize that we have in our DNA this part of us that wants to experience live music that I feel like goes back hundreds and thousands of years, and it's our ancestors and tribal drums going way back to to the primate days or whatever. Man, we are ready to experience this loud music again, and I really think it's time. Do I want it to be done safely and not to screw us up and send us back to get more people getting sick? Of course, but I think we need to figure out how to make it happen and how to make it happen ASAP. And that's how I feel, and I'm very passionate about it. And I'm not an anti-masker or anti-vaxxer or any of this. But I am a pro rocker, and it's time to make this happen again. I'm so glad. Kiss is playing here in 40 days. I plan to be there. I'm going to do anything it takes.
Nice.
And I think that it will. Who knows if I'll be able to get in? I don't know how many people they're going to allow in, but I'm trying to get into the Kiss concert. M3 announced they're going to do their concert in July. They said they're going to do it safe. Let's try it. Let's see. Let's do it. Let's do it. I think it's time.
Well, that's true. I mean, it comes down to like you say. I mean, it's time to get back to normal. It's you can't withhold, and it really comes down to personal responsibility. It's the same as everybody knows smoking cigarettes is bad for you. It could kill you. The threat. Everyone, and if you decide to do it, that's on you, man.
Right.
If you want to do that, and it's really pretty much the same. I mean, if you have the choice, no one's forcing you to go to these shows. So, if you're like you said, if you're vaccinated or if you feel safe or you wear a mask, it's your personal responsibility, but you can't hold back the rest of the world because of it. So, yeah, I think I agree. I think it is time,
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're all ready for for live music. And if you're not ready, stay home.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
fine.
if you don't
It's
feel
not
safe,
choice.
if you're vulnerable to being sick, don't go. Don't go. You're not forced to go to the concert. Just stay at home. If you don't feel safe, for whatever reason, then it's your choice. Don't go.
Yep,
No,
I agree.
Yeah. So, Victor, what about over in Europe right now? I know there's been, I know certain countries have, they've got live shows going on again. I mean, how's it going in your, part of the continent there in Spain and the southern part there? Is things picking up in terms of live music?
Well, there have been a few shows here in Spain. I mentioned to you guys last night that the one Spanish thrash band, Angelus Apatra, they did a show in Madrid about a month ago, and they wanted to do 2 nights, and the government would only allow them to a permit for 1 day, so they ended up doing a matinee and an evening show as a result. But there have been, there's been a lot of criticism. There was a famous pop artist from here that had 20,000 people in an arena without any type of social distancing. And there have been a few events like that, sporting events in Europe in general. Some of the old Eastern Bloc countries are letting everyone in as is. So, I mean, it really depends on where you are in Europe.
Yeah.
Well, how is the scene now in Spain? It's interesting. For me, being an old school guy, the band I always remember is Baron Rojo, who I believe are still together to this day.
Yeah.
And they were, of course, an early 80s metal band, but they're the ones that really made kind of, at least amongst the diehard metal fans, an international impact all over Europe and here in America. And I know the scene, that the metal scene is huge out there. And as far as the fan base go, I know there's a lot of bands. I know, what was the man on the Cruz de Sur records that I believe they were a Spanish or maybe they were from Mexico. They were kind of an epic kind of band. Miguel, sorry with that. I don't recall, but what are some of the newer bands out there, or the bands even just over the last 10, 15 years that have been making an impact in Spain?
Are you referring to Mago de Oz?
Yeah. I always call it Oz. That's the band I'm thinking of.
Yeah,
I didn't want to screw up the pronunciation there.
Which translated is Wizard of Oz.
Okay, I figured that.
Yeah, they're
a good band, really good band, epical kind of that. If you're into that kind of thing, or no, before what I heard.
My wife made me sit through a 2.5-hour show with them. They did a free show in the next town over for me for a summer festival, and
kind of like a Trans-Siberian Orchestra, I would imagine their show.
The problem is you've got to sit through like Tex-Mex music and like waltz music, and they're like a lot of stuff, and a lot of it isn't even live. So it.
Oh wow! Okay.
It kind of sucks. I could get into a lot of stuff, but I prefer to speak to the topic that you brought up. Angelus Apatra, who I just mentioned, their latest album was released last month, I believe. Well, actually 2 months ago, and was a #1 album here in Spain, beating out the Foo Fighters, who was #3 on the charts, which was huge because they've never charted that high here ever. For as much as there's a huge underground, Spain as a whole isn't really a rock-based country. It leans a lot more towards pop music, a hell of a lot more. Mm-hmm. They're one band. There's Crisix is another band that was trying to get over to the States as well. They're a thrash band as well. There's Tundra, who they're signed to a label in the U.S. as well, but they're like instrumental, like almost like a instrumental black metal type of a thing. So there's a few bands out there that are getting recognition outside of the country. The one cool thing that I got to see today is there's a festival that's out in the Northwest in part of the country called Galicia in English. It's called the Resurrection Festival, and it started in 2006 because two brothers and their guitarist and their band wanted to bring Sick of It All to play their town. And that festival has gone from 2006 to 2019, which is the last year that they had it, from 200 people to 80,000 people that attended the last event. So they've really created a like grassroots movement, while the Live Nations have come in and other big name companies, and have faltered because they haven't done things the right way. Let's say there's 3 or 4 grassroots festivals that have been created by fans, by people without just looking for a big, to cash in on something. And those have been the festivals that have really lasted these last, 10, 15 years that I've been here. So it's cool. And this festival, Resurrection, I would say is, I think you would have to start to mention it in, the same phrases as like, as a Hellfest or as, a Bloodstock or stuff. Well, I wouldn't say Wacken or Download because those are just so good. But a next tier festival that, so we'll see. We could aspire to have a Wacken or a Download type thing. They tried using the Download name here, but it didn't work. Ticketmaster came in, brought in, 4 big name bands, but they coincided with another festival that weekend. So you're splitting an audience. It makes absolutely no sense.
Well, they're trying to kill it. That's what they do. The corporations are coming in trying to kill the small guy, thinking that they could, overpower them by, we're going to do something the same day. That happened all the time with promoters back then. That's what they do. And it's good to see that the independents stood strong and won out on that one.
Yeah.
But, definitely.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. But the good thing about these European festivals, going back to that, even in Germany and stuff, those grassroots, they were all really started from the fan base festivals, from the the Artshock, the Dynamo, to to the Headbangers open air festival, to even Wacken. I mean, they were all small grassroots fans, and as you said, they all started with just a few thousand people, if that, and they just grew from there. But that was the whole intention. It was a passion thing. And I think whereas here in the U.S., it's just become so corporate. I mean, it started, I think the big festival, Mark, if you remember, was when Rocklahoma started in 2008. And as far as like an 80s metal festival, you hadn't seen anything like that since like the US Festival or whatever. But a 3-day thing, and that was before the Ozfest and all that were really going strong and stuff. So, and then from there it just took off, and now more and more corporate, people, and the Danny Weiner or whatever, he's got like 10 or 12 different festivals, and it's just gotten too corporate. Whereas the ones in Europe, they just stuck with the same one, and they've been going strong for years and years, especially in Germany, but throughout, like you say, France, Holland, Spain. Yeah, really cool. Sweden,
I think
rock.
Too, like in this country, I've gone up to heavy, or well, not this country, in Canada, in this continent, I've gone up to Heavy Montreal the past few years, which is a decent festival. I mean, it's great. It's so much fun. It probably brings in anywhere from 30,000 to 50,000 if they have a bigger name band like Metallica on the bill. And the thing I love seeing up in Canada, and this is, Montreal, so although it's not that far from the New York area, it feels like a very foreign place. They, speak French, all the, street signs are in French, and it's just a very different vibe up there. I love going up there because I see young kids at these festivals. And when I say young kids, I mean, teenagers, people in their 20s. And when I go to the festivals here in the States, it seems like a much older demographic. And I feel like in Europe too, in Sweden and possibly in Germany, there still is a younger bunch of people under, let's say, when I say younger people, let's face it, under 45, who still like and love this music. And I feel like that's something in the States we're struggling with. And, we could get into the whole thing with Gene Simmons talking about, is rock dead? And I every time I read what he's saying and people get mad at me for this, I agree with him. I really think there's been a real downfall of the music that we love in the States. And then there's a lot of reasons for that. But I feel like rock in general and the festivals in general, the future of it is, to me, in question right now. And I really think we need that younger demographic to come in to save stuff that is just, I think, is so much fun, like festivals. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I mean, and I definitely agree. There's, I think with, one of the things here is big, in the States is, these younger kids. I mean, even just for instance, like my own, kid. I mean, I'm trying to get her into just even rock, even like a Hellstorm or just, regular type of rock. And it's tough when you're competing when, they're, with all the technology they're watching, all the music or radio, it's just all pop. It's all machines, it's like, it's no instruments. It's all, and I think we were talking a little bit about this, with Victor last night is, one of the things is like, us growing up, we had MTV, right? And MTV fed us all that stuff. And I mean, I think in general, people like to be fed music, they don't necessarily like to go search it. And we don't have, ever since,
that's an excellent point, that so many people, when you say that, you speak the truth, but so many people would argue with you on that. They would say, no, I want my freedom. I want to go and I don't want to be told what to do. But the bottom line is you do want to be told what to do. You want to be force fed music by something like MTV. And as much as we used to criticize it back in the day, oh, they don't play the bands I love. Well, they played a lot of good bands, and the music industry was thriving because of it. But yeah, great point.
Yeah.
I don't think it's so much force fed though. I mean, when it comes to MTV, I think it's just hearing new music, discovering new music. That was a lot of people, especially like in the Midwest and stuff. If you didn't have a station like here on the West Coast, like KNAC, breaking some of the new metal bands, your only way to hear the newer bands, if LA Guns put out a new song or whatever, was through MTV. So it wasn't necessarily like force feeding you. Like, I mean, it did become that where it was like, so they played the same video every hour, and that was force fed. But a lot of people, especially with Headbangers Ball, people tuned in to discover new metal bands through Headbangers Ball or through other outlets like that. So
absolutely.
But yeah, go ahead, Matt.
MTV was they were tastemakers. There was that's how you found new music. And where are the tastemakers now? And that's really one of the reasons why there's podcasts. Really, because who's displaying these newer bands? I mean, where are you going to find them? Who's going to showcase them to you? It really, right now, it's podcasts because it's not on TV, it's not on the radio.
Yeah. I mean, and I just think that the corporations at some point, well over a decade ago, maybe even going on 2 decades ago, really took their eye off the ball. And Gene Simmons said something. It's like, if you plant a garden and you don't water it, it's not going to grow. And I really think that is so accurate, because the younger bands, where back in the day, Kiss, I mean, they put out 3 unsuccessful records before they finally broke with Alive, but
no chance today that'll happen.
Yeah, that would never happen. That would never happen today. It would have never happened 15 years ago. And instead, there's, all right, we're just going to, put the Eagles out there. We're going to invest all our money on, doing another tour with the Eagles or Metallica or Pearl Jam or all these. And the younger bands haven't gotten the ability to spread their wings and fly, and they're crushed before they ever leave the nest, and it's like it's like where there was support. And sure, was it hard to get a record deal back in the day, and was luck involved? Yeah, there was all that, but now there's nothing. It's just like it's like, if we can't expect rock to keep going unless there's some new people to come in and hold the torch and make it cool again. And I've said this to Victor before, make it sexy again. I mean, a bunch of old men on stage. My 12-year-old boy, he doesn't want to watch. He doesn't want to watch a 70-year-old guy on stage. It's not cool. He plays Fortnite. Fortnite's cool. There's hot chicks in Fortnite. There's people with guns. There's, it's exciting. There's mystery. I mean, that's where the kids are today with Rebellion. His parents don't understand Fortnite. What is Fortnite? So, it's the same stuff that made rock cool back in the day. It's like if rock wants to, regain the youth, we have to make it exciting and fun and sexy once again, because it's none of those things anymore. I mean, it's not.
It's really kind of safe now. I mean, when you go to some of these shows, I mean, obviously we go to shows, right? people were stage diving, people going crazy, but you can't stage dive anymore. Which I mean, a lot of ways I get it. A lot of these, clubs and bands are getting sued, and so the whole thing with
insurance,
even Randy Bly, and Lamb of God would happen to him. But I mean, just in general, I go to shows and I just see people, just it's safe now. It's not like it was back then when it was exciting. When I first went to like CBGBs, you went to your first, metal or hardcore show. It was like, oh man, this is nuts. You were just kind of scared to get in that pit. And then when you did, you felt so great. And then it just, blossomed from there. And like these days, it's like, these kids can't say, F you to each other without getting offended. And, and that's just the whole thing too. It's like, it's, if a lot of these scenes, you've got a lot of these, I don't want to use exact names, but sites out there that are, part of the encouraging the whole cancel culture as well with a lot of these, kids. I look at a guy like, the band, the hardcore band Amur, the guy, the singer, Frankie Palmieri, he said some controversial things, but nothing that hasn't been said before or hasn't been in lyrics, death metal lyrics, whatever before. And they're hammering this guy left and right. They have like local newspapers going to a show and just confronting him and just trying to, it's just ridiculous. So a lot of it's just, I think it's up to also a lot of the musicians and the fans is, they're going to have to be more resilient now than I think, or just, I'd say in a similar vein as when, heavy metal and hard rock really started first coming out, where it wasn't so much an accepted thing. They had to keep, pushing the envelope. And I think it's just tougher these days because everything is via, online and everything. And if you've got a lot of sites or social media thing, shutting bands down and artists down, not being allowed to really voice what they want to voice, it just sort of destroys the whole, I think, vibe of what rock and metal is about,
Yeah. I mean, I think it goes. Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, going back to what you said a little while ago, Mark, it is very different in Europe with the youth, because I've been to festivals in Germany, and it is the young kids, and the young kids are singing the lyrics. It's like, God, you weren't even born when these songs were around, to these, older bands, and it is a whole different vibe because they really cater to the younger people. It seems out there, and they're just so. I mean, metal is such a huge passion of and a huge part of life throughout Europe, especially you go to Sweden, Finland, Germany. But what's so interesting is visiting here at my mom's house in Huntington Beach. I was listening to KLOS, and I was listening to it a couple months ago or whatever when I was here before, and it was all like classic rock and stuff. Is what they normally play, the same stuff. Now they've been playing nothing but new music, and I'm going, "What? When did this start?" They're playing Dirty Honey like constantly.
Good.
Dirty Honey.
That's great.
They're playing Pretty Reckless. Rock is Dead, or no, that Long Live Rock by Hailstorm. They're playing all the time. They're playing Rival Sons, Greta Van Fleet. They're playing all these new bands, which is like, it's about time they're starting to play new bands on music. So I guess it started to come back, because before it was like, I guess KROQ, which was the modern, the new music channel, but they're just playing the horrible crap, and now they're playing like hip hop kind of stuff. So KLOS was always the rock station, but they were doing classic rock, and I'm going, why aren't they playing new stuff? And just, since I just came here, it's like, wow, they just started playing all this new stuff. So maybe it is changing. And I think, because KLOS was always kind of a leader, as one of the big FM radio stations throughout the country. I'm hoping maybe it will transfer on, because it's like, wow, this is actually cool. And I've been getting turned on to some good new songs from bands.
That's awesome.
On traditional radio, and I've never listened to terrestrial radio to discover new stuff. So there you go. But anyway, go ahead, Mark. What were you saying?
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, I just think I think so much of the stuff that we like, if it was released nowadays. I mean, I was listening to the song 22 Acacia Avenue by Iron Maiden the other day, and I was like, the lyrics in this song would probably be banned nowadays. If a rock star takes his shirt off on stage, oh, God forbid, a man is topless on stage anymore. It's like if there's a chick in your video doing splits on the car, that would probably be banned. It's like there's so much great stuff from the 80s that is just fun, sexy, harmless stuff that people have decided to just shut down. It goes beyond rock music, man. I mean, we could really get into a discussion about this, which I think last time I was talking with you, Bob, we touched upon some of this stuff, but yeah, I think it's time that we at least start with raising up on a pedestal anyone who's young, who loves this music, whether they're a super fan on Twitter or whether they're a band like Dirty Honey or The Pretty Reckless or something like that. I think they need to be celebrated for playing guitars and for loving the music. And then younger people who look up to these younger people will then say, hey, oh yeah, man, I'm going to check this out. I'm going to listen to some of this music, because the current route of where rock is going, the future doesn't look good to me. But I'm glad to hear, Bob, that they're selling on KLOS.
KLOS,
they're celebrating
Shocked.
that.
Yeah.
But there are some really, I mean, we've been doing a lot of interviews on Aftershocks with a lot of these younger retro rock type of bands, like you said. Dirty Honey is L.A. Maybe, Sons of Eden, and they're getting, I think Sons of Eden's got a pretty good contract too. I forget which label it was, but I think Greta Van Fleet, that really helped. They really helped sort of kick it off, and I think a lot of the youth are starting to pick up instruments again. Because that's the thing too. A lot of the young kids just don't want to play. They don't have the patience for it. I think it was when Rockstar came out, the video game thing. I think that's when kids just got like, oh, I could just sit in front of my, TV and play this instead of going to play the real thing. I think for a little while that did hurt, but I think it's slowly coming back. I hope so.
Yeah, I've heard other people say that are educated, and they feel like the tide is starting to turn. So I really hope so, because I think rock still has a lot of rebellion and a lot to offer people who aren't, old white guys like us. I really think that there is something there, and there's something beautiful about it as an art form, and I want to see it keep going on and on, for sure.
Right on.
Yeah.
Well, what do you think, Matt? Should we?
So, Victor, what about you? I mean, we'll give Victor here a chance
absolutely
to give his 2 cents. Yeah.
Sorry, Victor, didn't mean to leave you out there.
Yeah, no. I mean, I agree with pretty much everything that you guys are saying. I do think that a lot of the issues do come from some of the online media, though. The one thing that's kind of struck out to me these last few months is the Richie Kotzen, Adrian Smith album.
That was really good. Yeah.
Well, how it was promoted on a lot of sites was former Poison guitarist Richie Kotzen. And I was like, wait a second.
Oh, wow.
So every time Kotzen is played with Portnoy, because these guys are sucking on Portnoy's jock, it's okay. The Poison is never brought up. But because, they don't think it's a cool project, all of a sudden they have to bring in Poison to try to diminish that project. So the metal sites themselves are kind of to blame for not calling attention to a lot of these younger bands as well. They're still trying to make their bread and butter out of a lot of the older bands. Again, that's one of the reasons why I love doing a new releases post every Friday to say, hey, if you're not checking out any new bands or any new music, it's not because it's not available. It's your own fault for not going out of your way to try to find something. So,
good point.
And I think we got to do everything possible to try to keep the genre alive. You don't have to love Greta Van Fleet, but again, if it opens doors for other bands or for younger kids to get, on the bandwagon, then I'm all for it. My kids are into Fortnite as well, but when they saw that they had an event with AC/DC, they went apeshit. They're like, Dad, they're playing AC/DC on Fortnite. What song is this? We got to check out the new album, blah, blah, blah. So for them, it worked. I'm lucky that my 2 kids, love AC/DC and Iron Maiden and Anthrax and stuff like that. So for the most part, I'm lucky.
Yeah, that is my kids run the other way when they hear that music. Yeah.
Got to change them around, Mark.
Yeah, I've tried.
I was syncing an iPod for them, and I'm like, how does AIR by Anthrax have 863 plays all of a sudden? And of course, one day I'm paying attention. I'm like, my youngest son is just playing the song over and over on repeat for I don't know how many hours straight a day. I'm like, they have a larger catalog than just AIR. Please change the song because you're driving me nuts at this point. But hey, it's cool that they like anything that's rock based.
Was the song on a video game or something that he discovered?
Nope.
That's a rare song. I mean, that's a unique song to be off the Spreading the Disease record.
I just set up a bunch of playlists for them because they got into AC/DC fairly easily, and Queens of the Stone Age, and some of these bands that you hear on the radio more or less all the time. And I said, hey, do you guys want me to set up a bunch of music for you guys on an old phone of mine? Yeah, please do. And I did it. And just so happens that AIR just stood out to my youngest son, and he just plays that to death.
That's awesome.
That's
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Cool. So should we round this up, you think, Matt? Or
we're about an hour
we're about an hour in. I know Mark's got some things to do. Do you want to
I actually got another interview starting up, so I'm sorry if I'm cutting it short.
Oh no,
it's good.
We actually try to keep them about an hour, but in closing, I know you've got a lot of different, you've got some video streams. I see your newsletter that you send out. You got all sorts of stuff going on, Mark. Why don't you give out some links and so forth for people to check out?
Sorry, I was having an issue with my mute button there. Yeah, the best place is markstrigl.net because it links to everything I'm doing. So that's markstrigl.net, and there's just links on there to everything. Of course, the main podcast is still Talking Metal, and you can hear that by simply going to talkingmetal.com. It's also on Apple Podcasts and iHeartRadio, and we're back on Spotify after being thrown off, and all the other Google Podcasts and everywhere else. So you can get it just about everywhere.
Right on. And Victor, Mars Attacks.
Yeah, MarsAttacksRadio.com. Similar. I've got links to everything there, everything from social media to YouTube where my live streams replay, and to my Patreon.
All right.
Awesome.
Very cool. So with that said, man, thanks. I appreciate you guys. It's always fun talking with you. I know we've this first time we've had you on the Skull Sessions here, Victor. We'll definitely get you both back. And Mark, always a pleasure talking to you and getting an update with everything going on. And
absolutely, you guys, I really appreciate you having me on. And just for a second. And Bob, thank you for everything you've been doing and flying the flag for so long, man. We always admire you, going way back to your fanzine days, and the fact that you're still here, still doing it is really awesome. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. All right, gentlemen, always a pleasure.
Awesome.
We'll talk
soon.
All right, guys. All right. Take care.
Awesome.
All right, guys. See you.
Take care.